My name is Alina Holland. I'm 29 years old, and on Christmas morning, I stood in my parents' garage watching my sister sob happy tears over a brand new white BMW with a giant red bow stretched across the windshield, while I stood a few feet away holding a pair of plain white athletic socks with the original price tag still attached. $2.99. They hadn't even bothered to peel it off. Then my mother looked at me with a smile I used to think meant warmth, and she said, "Be humble, Alina. Each one receives what they deserve." My father nodded. My sister laughed, and I smiled, because I had learned a long time ago how to smile when what I really wanted to do was something else entirely. At 2:17 in the morning, I pulled my suitcase out of that house and drove away. I left something on the kitchen counter before I went, a stack of papers next to the coffee maker that I knew would change everything by morning. But to understand why I did what I did, you need to go back to where this story really begins. Because this didn't start on Christmas morning. It started 3 years earlier, on the best day of my professional life, the day my family realized I could be useful. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled, and please, stay with me until the end. I grew up in a house that smelled like biscuits on Sunday mornings and barbecue sauce on Saturday afternoons. My father, Roderick Holland, had built Holland's Kitchen from nothing, a southern comfort food restaurant in the suburbs that had been feeding the neighborhood for 18 years by the time this story takes place. He was the kind of man who filled a room without trying to, the kind of father who could make a toast at a birthday dinner that made everyone tear up without understanding exactly why. He loved his family fiercely and expressed that love the only way he knew how, by providing, by being the one who took care of things. When he could take care of things, Roderick Holland was the most confident man I had ever known. My mother, Tatiana, was the social architect of the family. She was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who brought the right casserole to the right neighbor at the right time, who could navigate a difficult conversation with the grace of someone who had spent decades making sure everyone felt comfortable. Everyone, that is, except the person who was being gracefully maneuvered. She wasn't cruel. I want to be honest about that from the beginning. She wasn't a villain in the way we like our villains in stories. Obvious, cold, easy to hate. She was something more complicated than that. She genuinely believed that family meant obligation, that love meant sacrifice, and that the strongest members of a family carried the weight so the others wouldn't have to feel it. She had grown up believing that. Her own mother had taught her that, and she passed it on, but she only passed it to me. My sister, Maris, was 4 years younger than me. She had graduated from college the summer before our Christmas, bright-eyed and completely unprepared for anything that required sustained discomfort. She wasn't lazy. I understand that now in a way I didn't then. She had simply never been asked to be anything other than the baby of the family, the one who was protected, the one for whom things were handled. She had a part-time retail job at a clothing boutique that barely covered her gas money, but her Instagram was a constant scroll of brunch photos, concert nights, and shopping hauls. She was 25 years old and still living at home, and no one, including her, seemed to think that was a problem worth solving. And then there was me. I was the responsible one. That was my identity in the Holland family, the way some kids are the funny one or the athletic one or the wild one. From the time I was 12 years old and helping my father balance the restaurant's monthly receipts at the kitchen table, I was the responsible one. I did well in school without being asked. I got a partial scholarship for college. I worked part-time jobs through my degree and graduated with minimal debt. I called home every Sunday. I showed up early and stayed late and never made anyone worry about me. And for a long time, I thought that was a compliment. I was 26 years old and driving a Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it and a passenger door that stuck every winter when the temperature dropped below freezing. I had to lean into it with my shoulder to get it open, which I had done so many times that it had become completely automatic, like blinking. A coworker asked me once why I didn't just get it fixed, and I said what I always said, "It still works." She gave me a look I didn't fully understand at the time. I had been at my previous marketing job for 3 years and was making decent money, but decent in a mid-level position at a mid-sized company still meant carefully tracking every grocery purchase and saying no to things I wanted. I was saving slowly. I had a plan. And then, on a Thursday afternoon in early autumn, I got a phone call that felt like the start of everything I had been working toward. A tech startup I had interviewed with twice offered me the position of marketing director. The salary was, I will be honest, more money than I had ever imagined making, more than double what I was currently earning. Benefits, Equity, a real title. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a full 10 minutes after the call ended, just breathing. When I drove home, I called my parents from the road. Tatiana cried, not a little. She cried in the way she cried at weddings, full and unrestrained, the way she cried when things mattered. My father got on the line, and his voice had that specific quality it got when he was proud but didn't quite have the words. Low and warm and slightly rough around the edges. That's my girl, he said. That is my girl. The following Sunday, they closed Holland's Kitchen early for a family dinner. Roderick made his smoked ribs, the ones that took 8 hours and that he only made for special occasions. Tatiana made her apple pie from scratch, the one with the lattice crust that I had never successfully replicated no matter how many times she tried to teach me. Maris even put her phone face down on the table for most of the meal, which, for Maris, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. My father stood at the head of the table and raised his beer bottle. To our successful daughter, he said, you've always been the responsible one. We always knew it would pay off. I felt warm all the way to the center of my chest. I felt seen and celebrated and loved. I did not know it was the last time that phrase would feel like a gift. 3 weeks later, my mother called on a Tuesday evening. I remember it was a Tuesday because I had just gotten home from my second week at the new job, still buzzing with the particular exhaustion of learning an entirely new environment, and I was eating leftover pasta standing at my kitchen counter when the phone rang. Tatiana's voice was careful in the way it got when she was about to ask for something. Not timid exactly, but precise. Chosen. Like she had rehearsed the words enough times that the edges were smooth. Alina, honey, now that you're doing so well, and we are so proud of you, we really are. We were hoping you might be able to help us with something, just temporarily. My father got on the line. He explained that the pandemic had hit Holland's Kitchen hard during the shutdown period, which was true. I had watched him struggle through it from a distance and had helped where I could in small ways. They had burned through their savings keeping the restaurant from going under. Now they were 4 months behind on the mortgage. The bank had sent notices. Just until we get back on our feet, Roderick said. 6 months, maybe a little less. How much is the mortgage payment? I asked. $1,500 a month, my mother said, and there's about $6,000 in back payments we owe. And I set down my fork. I ran the numbers quickly in my head. It was automatic, the way I did everything with numbers. A habit built from years of tight budgets. $1,500 a month was manageable on my new salary, tighter than comfortable, but workable. $6,000 was a significant chunk of my small savings, but not devastating. And these were my parents. These were the people who had eaten rice and beans so I could go on the 8th grade school trip. These were the people whose sacrifices I could not fully account for because they had never made me feel the weight of them, which, I understood, was itself a kind of sacrifice. I can do that, I said. I'll transfer the $6,000 this week and set up the automatic monthly transfer. I heard my mother exhale, a long relieved sound. Thank you, baby, my father said quietly. Thank you. What I did that week, and this detail matters because it is the detail that made what happened 3 years later possible, was open a spreadsheet. I labeled it Family Support Log. I was a marketing director. I worked with data every day. Tracking numbers was not paranoia, it was habit. I logged the initial $6,000 transfer. I set a reminder for the 6-month mark. I set up the automatic $1,500 monthly payment. I told myself, this is temporary, 6 months. I believed it completely. The first 6 months passed the way difficult things pass when you are busy and hopeful. Quickly and with occasional doubts you learn to set aside. I tightened my spending. I brought lunch from home every day. I stopped browsing the car dealerships I used to walk through just to imagine. That was a luxury I could not afford while paying 2 mortgages. I said no to a weekend trip my college friends organized for April, telling them I had a work conflict. The real reason was that after rent, the automatic transfer, and basic expenses, a weekend trip was not something I could do without dipping into savings I was trying to rebuild. In month 4, my father mentioned at Sunday dinner that Holland's Kitchen had landed a corporate catering contract with a local accounting firm. Business is picking up, he said, and I felt genuine relief. In month 6, I waited for the conversation. The one where my parents said, we're back on our feet, you can stop the transfer. That conversation did not happen. I brought it up carefully in early month 7. I called on a Sunday evening after dinner when the mood was usually relaxed. Mom, we're at 6 months now. I wanted to check in about the mortgage situation. How are things looking? There was a brief pause, just brief enough to be almost imperceptible. "Oh, honey," Tatiana said, her voice carrying that particular warmth she used when she was about to reframe something. "This month, we had some unexpected expenses with the refrigeration unit at the restaurant. It's nothing serious, but we're just a little stretched. Another 2 or 3 months and we should be in a much better position." 2 or 3 months, I repeated. "You know how these things go. We just need a little more time." I want to tell you that I pushed back. I want to tell you that the marketing director in me, the person who built financial projections and analyzed data for a living, immediately recognized the pattern and said something direct and clear. But there is a specific kind of blindness that exists only in families. You can be rigorous and analytical in every other area of your life and still find yourself unable to apply that same rigor to the people who raised you, because applying it would mean seeing something you are not ready to see. I was not ready. I told myself 2 or 3 more months is not unreasonable. Things go wrong. Refrigeration units break. This is what family does. "Okay," I said, "a couple more months." And the transfer kept going out on the 1st of every month, like a heartbeat. Year 2 did not begin with a decision. It began with the absence of a decision, the automatic payment running without interruption, the monthly reminder in my calendar that I kept snoozing because every time I almost called to have the real conversation, something came up that made it feel like the wrong moment. Roderick announced at a Sunday dinner that the restaurant had its best quarter in 5 years. He talked about expanding the back patio for the following summer. His voice had that old confidence in it again, the particular brightness of a man who feels like a provider. I sat across the table and did the math without meaning to. Best quarter in 5 years, expanding the patio, still taking $1,500 from me every month. I closed the arithmetic before it reached its conclusion. I told myself there were costs I didn't know about, debt they were still climbing out of, good months that didn't mean the crisis was over. Tatiana redecorated the restaurant's dining room. New chairs, new table linens, new light fixtures. An investment in the business, she explained, when I mentioned seeing the invoice she had accidentally left on the kitchen counter during a Sunday visit. Maris's Instagram that spring was a highlight reel of a person living entirely without financial anxiety. A girl's trip to a beach house, front row seats at a concert, a shopping haul video where she showed off 4 new outfits from a boutique I had window shopped but never entered. How does she afford all that on a part-time retail salary? I asked my mother once, keeping my voice casual. "Oh, you know Maris," Tatiana said warmly. "She's always been good at finding deals." I let it go, but I did not stop logging. Every month, on the 1st, when the transfer went out, I opened my spreadsheet and added the line, $1,500. The number in the total cell kept growing. The moment that almost broke through my careful avoidance came in the middle of summer. A heat wave settled over the city for 10 straight days, the kind of heat that makes the inside of your car feel like a held breath. My apartment's air conditioning unit failed on a Wednesday afternoon. The repair estimate was $850. I had just sent the first of month transfer 5 days earlier. I spent 4 days working from home with 2 fans pushing hot air around my apartment, drinking iced water, and taking cold showers before calls. On the 5th day, I put the repair on my credit card. 2 days after that, my father posted on Facebook a photo of a brand new flat-screen television mounted behind the bar at Holland's Kitchen. 72 inches, high definition. Caption, "Upgrading the experience for our guests. Come see it this weekend." And I stared at that post for a long time. I opened my spreadsheet. The total at the bottom of the column read $31,500 at that point, including the initial $6,000. I closed the laptop. That evening, I found something I had not been looking for. I was visiting my parents' house for Sunday dinner and went to get my coat from the front closet. In the closet, tucked between coats, was Maris's purse, open at the top, the way purses fall open when you set them down quickly. I wasn't looking through it, I wasn't snooping, but what I saw from the angle I was standing at was impossible to miss. A personal check written in my mother's handwriting made out to Maris for $300. In the memo line, in Tatiana's neat cursive, "Spending money." I took my coat. I went back to the table. I ate my dinner. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened the spreadsheet and sat with the number for a long time. I was not angry, exactly. I was something more precise than angry. I was clear. The fog that had let me avoid the arithmetic for 2 years was thinning, and the shape of what was underneath was starting to be visible. My parents were not struggling. My parents were managing, with my money supplementing theirs in a way that freed up enough of their income to buy new restaurant equipment, redecorate the dining room, take summer trips, and send Maris spending money. The temporary help had become a permanent subsidy, and everyone had simply agreed without ever saying so out loud, not to mention it. I should have had the conversation then. I know that, but I was afraid. Not of conflict. I handled conflict at work every day. I was afraid of what would happen to the version of my family I had grown up believing in if I held up a mirror to what we had actually become. So I waited. And the months kept passing, and the total in the spreadsheet kept climbing. By the 3rd year, I had developed a kind of expertise in the art of almost having the conversation. I would plan it on a Tuesday. By Thursday, something would come up. My mother would mention how grateful they were. My father would say something about being proud of me. And I would feel the ground shift under the conversation I was about to have, and I would decide to wait for a better moment. The better moment never came. What came instead was evidence I could no longer explain away. In August of the 3rd year, I drove past a car dealership on my way to a client meeting and saw a promotion for the new model year in the window. I pulled into the parking lot without planning to, sat in the air conditioning, and ran the numbers honestly, for the first time in a long time, about what I could actually afford if I stopped sending $1,500 a month to my parents' mortgage. The answer was substantially more than I was currently living on. I drove to my next meeting and did not let myself think about it again for 3 weeks. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I arrived at my parents' house and noticed something new in the driveway. My mother's car, freshly repainted in a deep forest green she had been talking about wanting for years. When I mentioned it, she waved her hand and said they'd found a great deal at a body shop a friend had recommended. I nodded. I went inside. I helped set the table. That evening, alone in the car on the drive home, I finally allowed myself to finish the arithmetic I had been interrupting for 3 years. I pulled up my phone at a red light and opened the spreadsheet. The total read $55,500, 36 months of payments plus the initial transfer. $55,500 that I had sent to my parents while eating homemade lunches and skipping vacations and driving a car with a sticky door while they redecorated their restaurant and repainted cars and sent my younger sister spending money. I sat with that number in the dark of my car at a red light that turned green while I wasn't looking until the car behind me honked. I drove home. I did not sleep well, but I still did not make the call. Not yet. Christmas was coming, and I told myself, the way I had told myself so many things over 3 years, that the holidays were not the right time. I would deal with it in January. I would have the conversation then, calmly, privately after the season was over. I did not know that the season was going to make the conversation unnecessary. The drive to my parents' house on Christmas Eve was familiar in the way that certain drives are. The body knows the route so well that the mind can wander. I had the trunk full of presents I had spent weeks choosing and significantly less money than I would have liked on. A cashmere scarf for my mother from the boutique she loved, $185 that had made me wince when the total appeared on the card reader. A handcrafted Italian leather messenger bag for my father, $160, a full skincare set from the brand Maris had been posting about for months, $130, $475 total, wrapped in discount paper from the dollar store because that is what paying 2 mortgages does to your gift wrapping budget. I had folded the edges extra carefully to compensate. When I pulled into the driveway, I stopped the car and just looked at the house for a moment. Every window was outlined in white lights. The front yard had what I could only describe as a professional-grade light display, the kind you hire a company to install, not the kind you do yourself on a Saturday afternoon with extension cords and mild frustration. A massive wreath hung on the front door, fresh greenery with a velvet bow in a deep burgundy. Everything sparkled and glowed against the winter dark. Inside, the living room looked like a holiday catalog shoot. The tree had to be 8 feet tall, and it was decorated entirely in coordinated gold and silver. New ornaments, I noted, all matching, not the eclectic collection of handmade and sentimental pieces we had accumulated over decades. The presents arranged beneath it were wrapped in thick, expensive paper with elaborate satin bows. My mother hugged me at the door wearing a deep red dress I had never seen before. Silk or something close to it, the kind of fabric that moves a certain way. She smelled like a perfume I didn't recognize either. My father was in the kitchen, pouring himself something amber from a bottle that I recognized as a brand he had once told me was reserved for very good occasions. "It's been a good year," he said when he saw me looking. We wanted to make this Christmas special. A good year. I smiled. I set my presents under the tree. Maris appeared at the top of the stairs in matching holiday pajamas, a brand I recognized from a department store that sold sets like that for somewhere around $90. And she was vibrating with a particular kind of barely contained excitement that I had not seen on her face since she was a child on Christmas morning. "Alina, have you looked at the garage?" she said. "The garage? Dad has been working on something secret out there for weeks. I heard him on the phone last Tuesday talking to someone about final paperwork and a delivery date." She said, "Delivery date, the way people say words they are enjoying the weight of." I looked at my father. He grinned, that theatrical cat with the canary grin, and said only, "Let's just say tomorrow is going to be a very exciting morning for a certain young lady." Maris let out a sound that was half shriek, half laugh, and covered her mouth with both hands. I smiled along with everyone. I was good at that. But something had shifted in the room, and I felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Not dramatic, not visible, just a quiet knowing in the body that the weather is about to change. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with its old poster on the wall and the quilt I had slept under since the 6th grade, I stared at the ceiling and let myself do what I had been not doing for 3 years. I added up the Christmas decorations, the professional light display, the new tree ornaments, the expensive wrapping paper, my mother's dress, my father's whiskey, Maris's pajamas, the redecorated restaurant, the repainted car. I thought about delivery date and final paperwork and the particular brightness on Maris's face. I thought about $55,500, and I thought, I already know. I have known for a long time. I just haven't let myself finish the thought. I fell asleep with the numbers still running. The smell of cinnamon rolls reached me before I was fully awake, our family's Christmas morning tradition, the same since I could remember. I lay still for a moment, breathing it in, feeling the strange double nature of being in a place that is both deeply familiar and no longer quite home. We gathered in the living room in our pajamas, Roderick with his coffee, looking relaxed and generous. Tatiana with her hair done even at 8 in the morning, her new dress replaced by a silk robe I also did not recognize. Maris practically trembling in her coordinated pajamas. Maris opened her gifts first, as she always had. The first box contained a designer handbag, real leather, the kind with the dust bag and the authenticity card. Then jewelry. Then the latest phone model, still sealed in its box. Then clothes from stores I walked past on my lunch break but never entered. Each gift produced a new sound from Maris. Delight building on delight, each one amplifying the next. Then my father stood up. He reached into the pocket of his robe and produced a set of car keys. Not just keys, a keychain with a small blue and white logo on it that every person in that room recognized immediately. "Maris," he said, with the voice of a man delivering the best line of his life, "there's one more gift, but it's not under the tree." The sound Maris made was not describable in ordinary language. She launched herself at my father first, then my mother, sobbing and laughing simultaneously, saying, "Are you serious?" over and over in the way people say it when they already know the answer and are trying to make it more real by hearing themselves say the words. We all walked out to the garage. The door lifted slowly, the way garage doors do, the mechanical grind of it somehow making the reveal more theatrical. And there it was, a white BMW. Brand new. I knew it was brand new from the showroom perfect way it sat there, from the way the overhead light caught the paint, from the enormous red bow stretched across the windshield. There was no question about whether it was used. There was no question about whether it was modest. It was a new BMW purchased from a dealership with a bow on it sitting in my parents' garage. Maris approached it the way you approach something you are afraid isn't real, slowly, with her hand outstretched as if checking for a mirage. She touched the hood. She turned to look at our parents. Her face was wet. "This is from both of us," Tatiana said, her arm around Maris, her own eyes shining. "You've been so mature lately, so responsible. We're so proud of you." I stood in the garage doorway and did the arithmetic I had been doing my whole life, quickly and automatically. New BMW. Entry-level models started around $43,000. With any options added, premium package, upgraded wheels, navigation, the things that made a car feel like a gift rather than a purchase. We were looking at $47,000 to $52,000, possibly more. My parents, who had told me they could not afford their mortgage payment, had purchased a $50,000 automobile for my sister. Maris, who had never paid a bill in her life, had been called responsible and mature. I, who had paid $55,500 toward their mortgage over 3 years, was about to receive my gifts. We went back inside. There were 3 packages under the tree with my name on them. Small packages. They had been wrapped in the same expensive paper as everything else, I noticed. The same satin bows. Someone had taken care with the presentation. I set them in my lap and opened the largest one first. Inside was a picture frame. Generic plastic, pale silver, the kind sold in drugstores near the greeting cards. It was still in its original packaging. The little twist ties still intact, the cardboard insert still in place. In the corner of the cardboard, a clearance sticker, marked down from $12 to $4.99. "For your apartment," my mother said brightly. "I thought you could use something nice for your photos." The second package, a candle, vanilla scented. The sticker archaeology on the bottom told a detailed story. Original price $15, first markdown to $8, second markdown to $3.49. I could track the entire journey from full price shelf to clearance bin just by reading the layers. "For ambiance," my father added helpfully. The third package was the smallest. I unwrapped it slowly. Plain white athletic socks, a 3-pack, and in the corner, not hidden, not removed, the original price tag, still attached, $2.99. I held them up. The price tag caught the light from the Christmas tree, that small rectangular beacon of exactly how much thought had gone into this. My family had just presented my younger sister with a $50,000 car. They had given me clearance items that totaled approximately $9. And the receipt for the socks was still on the socks. And then my mother said it. "Be humble, Alina." She was smiling, that particular smile that meant she was dispensing wisdom. Each one receives what they deserve. My father chuckled. Maris, still holding her BMW keys, still flushed with joy, laughed. The 3 of them laughed together at the kitchen table on Christmas morning, and I sat on the floor holding a pair of $2.99 socks with the price tag still on them, and I felt something happen inside me that I had no name for in the moment. It was not rage. Rage is loud and hot and moves outward. This was quieter than that. This was the specific sensation of a last thing giving way. Like the final support in a structure that has been slowly failing, the moment when the whole thing finally shifts. I looked at the socks, I looked at the price tag, I looked at my family. "Thanks," I said. "These will be perfect." And I smiled. The rest of Christmas Day, I performed with a precision I had not known I was capable of. I helped in the kitchen. I asked Maris questions about the car's features and listened to her answers. I called my grandmother and said the right things. I sat at the dinner table and ate my mother's cooking and laughed at my father's stories. And the whole time, underneath all of it, completely calm and completely certain, I was deciding. That night, lying in the childhood bedroom for what I already knew would be the last time in a long time, I did not feel the confusion and doubt I had felt the night before. I felt clear. The arithmetic was finished. The numbers were what they were, and they had been what they were for 3 years, and I had chosen not to finish adding them up because finishing meant knowing, and knowing meant choosing, and choosing meant this, whatever this was going to be. I got up at 1:45 in the morning. I went to my father's home office. I sat down at his desk, opened my laptop. I had brought it, as I always did, in case of work emergencies, and printed 36 months of my bank statements. Every transfer, $1,500 per month, highlighted in yellow with the marker I had packed in my laptop bag along with the charger and the emergency pain reliever, because I had known, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that this trip was going to end this way. I paperclipped the pages together. I wrote a note on a piece of my father's notepad, in the neat, unhurried handwriting of someone who has made a decision they are not going to reconsider. If you have money to buy Maurice a BMW, I'm confident you can manage your own mortgage. The automatic transfer stops today. Merry Christmas. Alina. I walked to the kitchen and set the stack of papers on the counter next to the coffee maker. The new one, the model I had seen in a Williams-Sonoma catalog, the one my mother had mentioned wanting, the one that had appeared in this kitchen sometime in the last 2 months while I was sending $1,500 a month because my parents couldn't afford their mortgage. Then I went upstairs and packed my suitcase, methodically. Not in anger, not in haste. I took my toiletries and my laptop and my clothes. I took the gift I had driven here with, the cashmere scarf I had bought my mother, which was still in my bag because I had decided, somewhere in the middle of the day, not to give it. I took the socks too. I had paid for them. I might as well use them. At 2:17 in the morning, I rolled my suitcase through the front door, across the porch, and down to my car. The winter air was cold and clean and completely still. The neighborhood's Christmas lights were off, most of them. Just the occasional house still glowing, somebody's timer set late. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of the Honda Civic with its 140,000 miles and its sticky passenger door and its reliable, unglamorous faithfulness, and I got in. I sat there for a moment with the engine running. 3 years. $55,500. 36 months of first-of-the-month transfers and ramen lunches and missed trips and grinding financial anxiety while the family I was supporting bought new furniture and new light fixtures and new Christmas ornaments and, finally, a $50,000 car for the daughter who had never paid a bill. Each one receives what they deserve. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. And for the first time in 3 years, the first time since I had picked up the phone on a Tuesday evening while eating pasta at my kitchen counter and heard my mother's careful, practiced voice asking for something temporary, I felt light. Not happy exactly, not triumphant, just light. Like I had set down something very heavy, something I had been carrying for so long that the weight of it had become indistinguishable from my own body, and now that it was gone, I could feel for the first time how much it had cost me just to stand upright. I drove home through the empty Christmas streets with the radio off and the windows cracked slightly, breathing cold air, and I thought about nothing at all. My phone had 37 missed calls by the time I turned it back on the following afternoon, but that, and everything that came after, is a story for another part. 37 missed calls. That was the number on my screen when I turned my phone back on the afternoon of December 26th. I had slept until nearly noon, the deep, boneless sleep of someone who has finally put down a weight they have been carrying for too long. And then I had made coffee, sat in my kitchen in the winter quiet, and simply existed in my own space for a while before I reached for the phone. 37 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 22 text messages, and 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, which meant the radius had already expanded beyond my immediate family. I poured a second cup of coffee. I sat down, and I listened to every single voicemail from start to finish, not because I needed to, but because I thought I owed it to myself to hear exactly what my leaving had produced. My mother's messages came first, and they moved through stages the way grief is supposed to but rarely does. In clear, distinct phases that told me everything about how she processed being confronted with something she hadn't anticipated. The first voicemail, left at 6:48 in the morning. Alina, honey, it's Mom. We found your note and the papers on the counter, and we're confused, baby. We don't understand what you mean. Can you call us back when you get this? We're worried about you. Confused, not guilty, not caught, confused. I noted that. The second 40 minutes later, Alina, this is Mom again. Your father and I have been talking, and we want you to know that whatever you're feeling right now, we can work through this as a family. Please call us back. The third, at 9:15, the warmth had thinned, replaced by something with more structure to it. Alina, I have to say that leaving in the middle of the night without talking to us first is not how we handle things in this family. This was hurtful and frankly embarrassing, and we would appreciate the courtesy of a phone call. There it was, the pivot from concern to correction. I had grown up with that pivot. I knew exactly how quickly it could happen. The fourth voicemail was my father, Roderick Holland, measured and authoritative, the voice he used when he was managing a situation at the restaurant. Calm on the surface with something pressurized underneath. Alina, Dad here. I want you to know that your mother and I acknowledge that perhaps we weren't as thoughtful as we could have been with the gift situation yesterday. That's fair. But I have to be honest with you. Your reaction to this has been disproportionate, and I'm concerned about you. Leaving in the middle of the night, not answering calls, that's not like you. Call me back when you're ready to talk like adults. My reaction, my leaving, my behavior. Not the 3 years, not the $55,000, not the BMW sitting in the garage while his older daughter received clearance socks with the price tag still attached. My reaction was the problem. I took a long sip of coffee. Then came Maris. Alina, what the hell? Do you know what you've done? Mom has been crying all morning. Dad can barely function. You left in the middle of Christmas night and left some accusatory note. And now everyone is freaking out. If you're upset about the gifts, fine, but this is so incredibly selfish. I can't believe you're doing this right now. Call me back immediately. Selfish. I sat with that word for a moment. Selfish. Me. The person who had transferred $55,000 to her parents' mortgage account while eating homemade lunches and driving a car with a sticky door and turning down vacations and skipping dinners with friends. I was the selfish one. Fish. The text messages were more compressed, which somehow made them more revealing. From my father. We need to talk immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. From my mother. After everything we have done for you, Alina. After everything. From Maris, 3 separate messages sent within 20 minutes of each other. You ruined Christmas. Mom is devastated. I hope you're happy. We all know you make good money. Why are you being so stingy about helping family? Stingy. I read that one twice. Stingy. $55,500 transferred in monthly increments over 3 years while I put an $850 air conditioning repair on a credit card because I had just sent the first of month payment 5 days earlier. Stingy. I set the phone face down on the table. I finished my coffee. I washed my mug, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Then I picked up my car keys and drove to the dealership. I want to describe what it felt like to walk into that showroom because I think it matters. For 3 years, I had occasionally wandered through car lots the way some people window shop for real estate they can't afford, as a kind of pleasant, melancholy exercise in imagining a different life. I would walk the rows, look at the sticker prices, run the monthly payment calculations in my head, and arrive every time at the same conclusion. Not while I'm paying their mortgage. Not yet. Maybe next year. This time, I walked in and none of that happened. The calculation that had lived in the back of my mind for 3 years, the one that automatically subtracted $1,500 from every financial decision I considered, was gone. And the absence of it felt less like a liberation than like suddenly being able to hear clearly in a room where there had always been noise. I hadn't realized how much mental space that constant arithmetic had occupied until it was no longer running. I told the salesman what I wanted. Reliable, practical, good safety rating, reasonable gas mileage. I did not need luxury. I was not compensating for anything or proving a point to anyone who wasn't in the room. I was 39 years old and I needed a car that worked. A car with air conditioning that functioned and doors that opened without requiring a shoulder check every winter morning. I bought a Honda CR-V. Dark gray, comfortable seats, a sound system that connected to my phone without a Bluetooth adapter held together with a rubber band, which had been the situation in the Civic for the last 18 months. The salesman was walking me through the paperwork when my phone buzzed on the table between us. My mother's name on the screen. I turned it face down and finished signing. I drove my new car home with the radio on and the heat set exactly where I wanted it and both doors opening without any effort at all, and I felt something I recognized from childhood, the specific physical sensation of a good day. Not a complicated day, not a day weighted with significance, just a good day, clean and uncomplicated, belonging entirely to me. My phone buzzed 7 more times on the drive home. I let it. The weeks that followed were, in the most practical and undramatic sense, the beginning of learning how to live like myself again. I went grocery shopping without doing the calculation. For 3 years, I had stood in grocery store aisles doing a specific kind of triage. This item or that item, not both, stay under this number, you already spent too much this week. And the absence of that triage was disorienting in the best possible way. I stood in the produce section one evening in early January and put things in my cart simply because I wanted to eat them. Asparagus, which I loved and had been buying rarely because it felt indulgent. A good cut of salmon. Fresh herbs for a recipe I had bookmarked 2 years ago and never made. $63. A grocery trip that cost $63 without any anxiety. I know that sounds like nothing, but after 3 years, it felt like a small revolution. I bought furniture. Real furniture, not the secondhand pieces I had been arranging and rearranging for years, trying to make a dorm room look like an apartment. A sofa I actually wanted to sit on. A dining table with 4 matching chairs so that when I had people over for dinner, everyone sat at the same table on the same chairs and there was no folding chair borrowed from the closet because I had never gotten around to buying a full set. A proper bed frame with a headboard, the kind that made a bedroom look like a place where a grown adult lived. I said yes to things. My colleague Pamela Rhodes had been inviting me to her monthly book club for over a year and I had declined every time with work-related excuses. In January, I said yes. 6 women sitting around Pamela's dining room table with wine and strong opinions about a novel I had genuinely enjoyed reading. And me, sitting there, present and unhurried, with nothing pulling at the edge of my attention. My friend Cynthia Webb organized a long weekend in New Orleans in February. I booked the flight the same day she sent the group text. I started dating again. I had been on 3 dates in 3 years. 3. Because the low-level financial anxiety and the constant sense of owing something to people who weren't present had made it nearly impossible to be fully in a room with someone new. His name was Damon Whitfield. We met through a mutual friend at a networking event in late January. He worked in software development, which meant he understood deadlines and systems and the particular fatigue of keeping many things running at once. He was funny in a quiet way, the kind of humor that reveals itself slowly. He listened when I talked without preparing his response while I was still speaking. When he suggested dinner, I didn't calculate whether I could afford to split the bill. When he mentioned a weekend trip upstate in March, I didn't decline because of obligations I couldn't explain. That was new. That was entirely, surprisingly new. About 3 weeks after Christmas, the calls from immediate family began to thin, and calls from other people began to arrive. My Aunt Deborah, my mother's older sister, called on a Thursday evening with the careful warmth of someone who has been briefed. She asked how I was doing, said she was thinking about me, mentioned that she had heard there had been some tension over the holidays, and she just wanted to reach out. She did not mention the BMW. She did not mention $55,500. She mentioned that family is complicated and that she hoped I would find my way back to what matters. My Uncle Terrence sent a text. Alina, family is all we have in the end. Don't let pride take you somewhere you can't come back from. Pride. My desire to stop transferring $1,500 a month to people who had just used their savings to buy a $50,000 car was being characterized as pride. Then came the call I had known was coming and had been both dreading and honestly expecting. My grandmother, Rose Holland, 81 years old, sharp as she had always been, but with a voice that had acquired a fragility over the last few years that she deployed with an expertise I could only admire. She left a voicemail on a Sunday afternoon. Alina, dear, it's Grandma Rose. I don't get involved in these things usually, you know that. But I'm not as young as I used to be, and I want to see my family whole before the Lord calls me home. That's all. I just want to see everyone together. Can you think about that for me, sweetheart? For your old grandmother? I listened to that voicemail 3 times. The first time, I felt a wave of genuine guilt. The particular, almost physical guilt that grandmothers are uniquely capable of producing. The second time, I noticed that she had not asked me anything specific. She had not addressed what had happened. She had simply positioned herself, her age, her mortality, her love, as a reason for me to return to a situation that had cost me $55,000 and 3 years of my life. The third time, I understood that whether she knew it or not, whether she meant it or not, she was part of the same system. I called her back. I told her I loved her and I was fine and I was not estranged from anyone. I was simply taking some space to think. She seemed satisfied with that. We talked about her arthritis and her neighbor's new dog for 15 minutes and said goodbye warmly. It was the cleanest conversation I had in that entire period. I understood now what had happened. Roderick and Tatiana had told their version of events to everyone in the orbit of the Holland family, and the version they had told did not include the BMW or the spreadsheet or the 36 months of transfers. The version they had told was simpler and more useful. Their successful daughter had inexplicably turned on them over the holidays. She was going through something. She needed to come back to her senses. In their version, they were not people who had spent their oldest daughter's money for 3 years. They were bewildered, wounded parents whose child had hurt them without cause. I blocked the numbers I needed to block. Not in anger, just in self-preservation. The way you close a window when it's raining, not because you hate rain, but because it's coming inside. 3 weeks after Christmas, on a Saturday afternoon when I was rearranging the new bookshelves in my living room and had a podcast playing and a cup of tea going cold on the coffee table, I heard a knock at my door. Not the buzzer from downstairs. An actual knock, which meant someone had come through the building entrance already, which meant it was someone who knew the door code. Only one person in my family knew my door code. I looked through the peephole. Maris was standing in the hallway. She was wearing jeans and a plain gray hoodie. No carefully assembled outfit. No statement boots, nothing that signaled a performance. She looked smaller than I was used to seeing her. She had been standing there for what the security camera timestamp later told me was 53 minutes before she knocked. I opened the door. "Your phone goes straight to voicemail," she said. "I blocked your number." She absorbed that. "Can I come in?" I stepped back and let her in. She walked into my living room and stopped. I watched her take it in. The new sofa, the bookshelves, the real dining table, the framed print on the wall that I had bought from a local artist at a market in January because I had simply wanted it and could afford it. The general quality of a space that belonged, entirely and without apology, to the person who lived in it. "It's nice," she said. There was no resentment in her voice, just acknowledgement. "Sit down, Maris." She sat on the edge of the sofa. She had her hands folded in her lap, which was not a posture I associated with my sister. "I came because I wanted to talk to you, not because Mom asked me to." She looked up. "She did ask me to, but that's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want to understand what happened. The real version. Not what Mom and Dad are saying. The actual thing that happened from you." I looked at her for a long time. I was deciding something, and I think she knew I was deciding it, and she sat very still while I did. "They've been taking $1,500 a month from me for 36 months, I said, plus $6,000 upfront for back payments. Total $55,500. The agreement was 6 months. It became 3 years. Maris's face did something complicated. "While I was sending that money," I continued, keeping my voice even, "I put an air conditioning repair on a credit card because I had just sent the first of month transfer. I turned down trips and dinners and opportunities. I drove a car with 140,000 miles because I couldn't justify a car payment while paying their mortgage. I told people I was busy when I meant I was broke." "I didn't know the number," Maris said. Her voice was quiet. "I knew you were helping them. I didn't know it was $55,000. Yes, but you knew I was helping, and you didn't ask how much, and you didn't ask why your parents needed help while somehow managing to buy you concert tickets and spending money and a $50,000 car." She flinched. "I found a check," I said. "In your purse. I wasn't going through it. I saw it from across the room when I went for my coat. $300. Written in Mom's handwriting. Spending money." Maris closed her eyes briefly. "I know. So some of the money I sent for their mortgage was being redistributed to you for spending money." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "Maris, I don't think you're a bad person. I don't even think you're selfish in the way people are selfish when they know what they're doing and choose it anyway. I think you grew up in a system that made it very easy not to look too closely at where things came from, and looking closely would have been uncomfortable, so you didn't. That's still not innocent. I know. I'm not saying it is." She looked down at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. Not the showy tears I had seen Maris deploy at family dinners when a conversation was going a direction she didn't want, but something that looked considerably more like genuine reckoning. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I don't want you to do anything for me. I want you to think about what it means to be 25 years old and still living at home and still taking spending money from parents who are struggling, and ask yourself what the plan is. What if there isn't a plan? Then maybe it's time to make one." She sat with that for a long moment, then, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." Are you completely done with all of us? Is this permanent?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "I'm not done with the idea of a family," I said finally. "I'm done with the version of the family where I'm the one paying for everything while being called irresponsible for wanting to stop. Those aren't the same thing." She nodded. She stood up slowly. At the door, she turned back once. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know if that means anything right now, but I am." "It means something," I said. "It's a start." 2 months after Christmas, on a gray Tuesday afternoon in late February, Maris knocked on my door again. I had unblocked her number the week before. Something had shifted in our conversation, something genuine enough that I was willing to leave that door slightly open. I opened the door and knew immediately from her face that something had happened. "They lost the BMW," she said. I had been half expecting this. I had not let myself think about it directly, but underneath the surface of everything I had known, with the clarity that comes from actually finishing the arithmetic that the structure could not hold. "Tell me what happened." She came inside. We sat at the dining table, the real one with the matching chairs, and she told me. Roderick and Tatiana had financed the BMW. This was the detail that made everything else make sense. They hadn't saved for it exactly, or not only. They had made a down payment, using money from a strong quarter at the restaurant, money that should perhaps have gone toward the mortgage buffer I had been providing, and financed the rest. The monthly payment on the BMW was $720. They had calculated, apparently without discussing it with me, that I would continue sending $1,500 a month. With my contribution, they could cover the BMW payment and the mortgage and their regular expenses and still have money left over for the things that had been appearing in the house over the last year. The new coffee maker, the redecorated dining room, the Christmas light display. When I stopped the transfer in December, their budget collapsed in a way that, looking at the numbers, was almost geometrically perfect in its inevitability. They could cover the mortgage or the car payment, but not both. Not without my $1,500. They had tried to manage both for 2 months by pulling from wherever they could, hoping I would call, hoping the pressure would work. It hadn't. The bank had taken the car back on a Thursday morning. "There's more," Maris said. I waited. Dad had a heart attack 6 weeks ago. The floor tilted slightly. "What?" "He's okay. He's going to be okay." But it was serious. He was in the hospital for 5 days. The cardiologist said it was stress, the combination of the restaurant pressure and losing the car and the mortgage and everything falling apart at once. Why didn't anyone call me? "Your number was blocked. And I think Mom was too angry at first and then too scared to reach out and have you not answer." I sat with that. My father had been in a hospital and I hadn't known. Whatever had happened between us, he was still my father, and the image of him in a hospital bed was something I needed a moment to get past. "Is he home?" "He's home. He can't do heavy lifting or long shifts for at least 6 months. He's been mostly at the house." "And the restaurant?" Maris looked at her hands. "They couldn't keep up with the rent on the commercial space once everything started falling. They closed Holland's Kitchen at the end of January." 18 years. Holland's Kitchen. The thing my father had built from nothing, the thing that had smelled like biscuits and barbecue sauce and possibility, the thing that had fed the neighborhood for nearly 2 decades, had closed because the money that should have been their safety net had been spent on financing a car for a 25-year-old who had never asked where the money was coming from. I didn't say that. I just sat with it. "Where are they living?" "Aunt Deborah's. She has the spare room. It's not great." I could imagine. Aunt Deborah had opinions the way some people have furniture. Everywhere, always present, impossible to ignore. "And you?" "I'm at a friend's, Jordan's couch. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. The boutique cut hours and then cut staff. Without the car and without the job, I've just been..." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I've been figuring it out." And I looked at my sister, 25 years old, sitting at my dining room table, without a job or a car or a home, wearing jeans and a hoodie and something on her face that I had never seen there before. Not helplessness, exactly. Something harder and more honest than helplessness. "I'm not here to ask you to fix it," she said, as if she could read my thoughts. "I want you to know that. I'm not here with a plan for how you can make this better. I thought you should know. I appreciate you telling me." She stood to go. Then she stopped. "Alina?" "Yeah. I've been thinking a lot since our last conversation, about what you said, about me not asking where things came from." She paused. "You were right. I was comfortable not asking. And being comfortable like that is its own kind of choice, even if I didn't think of it that way at the time." I looked at her. "I have a job interview on Friday," she said. "A real one. HR coordinator position, full-time. I don't know if I'll get it, but I'm trying." "Good," I said. "I mean that." After she left, I sat at the table for a long time. The news of my father's heart attack sat in the center of my chest like something cold and dense. Not guilt, exactly, because I had not caused his stress, his choices had, but grief. The uncomplicated grief of a daughter who loves her father even when she cannot be what her father's financial decisions required her to be. I thought about what I could reasonably do. Not what I was obligated to do, not what family loyalty demanded, but what I could do, in good conscience, with clear limits, without stepping back into a dynamic that had cost me 3 years of my life. I didn't have an answer that night, but I was asking the right question for the first time. 3 weeks after Maris's second visit, she called. Not from a blocked number, not from someone else's phone. Her own number, which I had unblocked. I got the job, she said. Tell me about it. And she did. HR coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company, full-time, with benefits that kicked in after 90 days. The salary wasn't large, but it was steady and it was hers. She had taken 2 buses to the interview because she didn't have a car. I'm proud of you, Maris. A pause. Really? Really? Another pause. Longer. Is it okay if I tell you something? Something I've been thinking about? Yes. She took a breath. When I was growing up, Mom and Dad always described you as the one who could handle things. Alina doesn't need help. Alina figures things out. I thought it meant you were capable. But I've been thinking about it differently lately. I think they were telling me something else without knowing it. They were telling me, Alina is the one who carries things. Alina is the one we can lean on. And they were telling you the same thing from your side. You're the responsible one, which sounds like a compliment, but also means you're the one who doesn't get to need things from us. I was quiet. I grew up thinking I was loved more because I was given more, and maybe that's true in some way, but I also think I was never asked to grow up. Nobody expected anything from me, and that's its own kind of problem that I'm just starting to understand. This was the Maris I had never known, the one who had been underneath the Instagram grid and the designer handbags and the comfortable blindness all along, the one who, when her comfortable life was abruptly removed, turned out to have some bone to her. Jordan's couch is getting old, she said, and I could hear the careful lightness in her voice. The way she was asking something without quite asking it. I had thought about this possibility. I had thought about it practically, and I had thought about it in terms of what it would mean and what it would require and what it could not be allowed to become. I have a spare room, I said. She went very still on the other end of the line. The conditions are not negotiable, I continued. $400 a month, first of the month, no exceptions. It's not because I need the money. It's because this is how adults live. They pay for the space they occupy. If you can't make rent 1 month, we talk about it in advance, not after. And you are responsible for your own life while you're here, your food, your schedule, your decisions. I am not your mother, and I am not your safety net. Yes, I can do that. And Maris, yeah, I'm glad you got the job. She moved in the following Saturday with 2 duffel bags and a box of kitchen items she had accumulated at Jordan's. No designer clothes, no elaborate hair, nothing that suggested the princess of the Instagram grid. She stood in the doorway of the spare room, looking younger and more real than I had ever seen her, and said, "Thank you for this." "Don't thank me," I said. "Pay rent." She laughed. It was a real laugh, not performed, not charming, just the sound of someone who had been scared and was starting to feel solid ground. It was a Saturday morning in late March, 6 weeks after Maris had moved in, when I heard the knock at my door that I had been both dreading and somewhere underneath everything waiting for. Maris had left early for her first Saturday shift. The apartment was mine, quiet and morning lit, and I was at the kitchen counter with coffee and the kind of contented silence that I had learned to recognize as the sound of my own life. Through the peephole, my mother. Tatiana Holland standing in my hallway alone. No Roderick, no intermediary. Just her, in a coat I recognized from several years ago, practical, not new, holding a manila envelope against her chest like a shield, or perhaps a peace offering. She looked like she had been standing there working up to the knock for some time. I opened the door. "Thank you," she said immediately. "I know you didn't have to do that. Come in." She walked into my living room and stopped the way Maris had stopped the first time, taking in the space, the furniture, the evidence of a life built on solid ground. She stood there for a moment without speaking. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "You've made it beautiful." "Sit down, Mom." She sat on the edge of the sofa, the envelope in her lap. She looked, I realized, genuinely older than the last time I had seen her. Not dramatically, but in the small ways that accumulate when someone has been under sustained stress. Less armor, more person. "We received the foreclosure notice," she said. 30 days to vacate. I absorbed that. "When?" Last week. Where are you and Dad going? We'll stay at Deborah's a little longer. She's been kind in her way. I nodded. Alina. My mother looked at me directly, and I saw something in her face that I did not have a category for, because I had never seen it there before. Not the careful social warmth, not the managed presentation, something stripped of those things, just the face of a woman who had run out of positioning to do. Before I show you what's in this envelope, before I ask you anything, I need to say something first. Okay. What we did was wrong. I waited. Not just the gifts at Christmas, the whole thing. 3 years of taking your money and pretending it was temporary when I knew, that we had stopped thinking of it as temporary a long time ago. I knew we had started spending as though your contribution was just part of our income. I knew that. And I kept not bringing it up because bringing it up would have meant having a conversation I wasn't ready to have. She paused. I told myself you could afford it. I told myself you were doing well and the sacrifice wasn't that significant for you. I told myself a lot of things because the alternative was admitting that I had turned my oldest daughter into a resource instead of a person. The apartment was very quiet. I'm not saying this to get something, she continued. I'm not saying it because I want you to forgive me right now or because I think it fixes anything. I'm saying it because it's true and because you deserve to hear it and because I have been carrying it since Christmas morning when I watched you smile and say, "These will be perfect." And I saw what was on your face underneath the smile, Alina. And I knew exactly what I had done. I sat with that for a long moment. Then she opened the envelope and set the papers on the coffee table between us. Medical bills. My father's hospitalization, 5 days in cardiac care, the cardiologist, the follow-up appointments, the medication. The insurance had covered a significant portion. The remainder still standing was several $1,000s. I'm not here to ask you to pay these, she said. I want to be very clear about that. I am here to ask, only if you're willing and only if it makes sense for you, whether you could add your father and me to your health insurance plan, temporarily. 6 months, maybe less, until he's healthy enough to work again and we can get coverage through an employer. You know what I need to say about the word temporarily. She looked at me steadily. I know. I studied her face. I was looking for the thing I had learned to recognize over the years, the performance underneath the sincerity, the ask concealed inside the apology. I had become very good at reading that particular language. I did not see it. What I saw instead was just a tired woman who had made expensive mistakes and was trying to find a floor to land on. 6 months, I said. Exactly 6 months. I'll add you to my plan and you'll pay me the exact premium difference. I'll get the number from HR and send it to you. Not approximately. The exact number, first of the month. Yes. If you miss a payment, coverage ends. No discussion, no extension. Understood. And Mom? I waited until she looked at me. This is not reconciliation. This is not me saying everything is fine or that we're back to where we were. It is me saying that I am not willing to let Dad go without medical care because of what happened between us. Those are different things. I know they are, she said, and I'm grateful for the distinction. She stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. And there was something on her face, just for a moment, that I recognized from childhood. The look she used to have when she was proud of me before pride became tangled up with utility. Just proud. You've become someone remarkable, she said quietly. I wish I could say we had more to do with it than we did. She left. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, looking at nothing in particular. Then I called HR and asked about adding dependents to my health plan. The premium difference was $280 a month. I set up the reminder. I sent my mother the number. She sent the first payment 3 days before it was due. There is a specific kind of quiet that exists in a life you have built entirely for yourself. Not silence. Silence can be lonely, can be the absence of things you wanted and didn't get. This was different. This was the quiet of a Saturday morning when the coffee is exactly how you like it and the light is coming through the windows at the angle that makes your living room look like somewhere you chose to be. And there is nowhere you have to be and nothing you owe and no calculation running in the background of your mind subtracting someone else's needs from your own. I had learned, in the months since Christmas, what that quiet sounded like. I was still learning not to feel guilty about it. Maris moved in on the first Saturday of April with 2 duffel bags, a box of kitchen things, and the particular careful energy of someone who knows they are operating on borrowed goodwill and is determined not to waste it. I had thought, before she arrived, that living with my sister would be an exercise in patience, that I would be managing her the way I had always managed things in our family, doing the invisible labor of keeping things functional while she occupied the space I had created. I had prepared myself for that. I had drawn my internal lines clearly enough that I thought I could hold them. What I had not prepared for was discovering that the person I had always known as Maris Holland, the Instagram grid princess, the spending money recipient, the girl who had never been asked to grow up, was not actually who my sister was. She was who my sister had been allowed to be. Underneath that, there was someone else. The first week, she was almost comically careful. She cleaned up immediately after every meal. She paid the $400 on March 31st, the day before April even started. She asked before she used anything, moved around the apartment with the restrained energy of a guest who has been clearly told they are not quite a guest. The second week, something loosened slightly. She started cooking, real cooking, not reheated things. And one evening, she made pasta from scratch, standing at my kitchen counter with flour on her forearms and a look of concentrated determination that I had genuinely never seen on her face before. "Where did you learn to do that?" I asked. "YouTube," she said, without looking up from the dough. "I've been watching cooking videos for 3 weeks. I decided if I'm going to feed myself, I should actually know how." I sat on a kitchen stool and watched her work. There was something almost moving about it. This person who had grown up with her meals provided, her expenses covered, her needs anticipated, standing in a small apartment kitchen, teaching herself pasta making from scratch because she had finally, at 25, encountered the experience of needing to do something herself. "It's good," I said when we ate it. "Better than good." She looked genuinely pleased. Not the performed delight of someone receiving a compliment they expected, the real thing, the satisfaction of having made something work. We developed routines without planning them. Sunday mornings, we were both usually home, and we fell into a habit of coffee at the kitchen table before the day started, sometimes talking, sometimes just occupying the same space in a comfortable silence that I had not expected to be possible with my sister. We split grocery runs. She learned which nights I needed the apartment quiet for work calls, and I learned that she studied for her HR certification exam on Thursday evenings and needed the television off. It was not seamless. There were moments of friction. The week she forgot rent until the 5th, and I said nothing but sent her a reminder text that was probably cooler than it needed to be. The evening I came home from a long day to find the kitchen not cleaned up, and felt a flash of the old dynamic threatening to reassert itself. The Sunday she made plans to visit our parents without telling me, and I felt, briefly and irrationally, like territory was being negotiated around me. But we handled these things. We talked about them, briefly and directly, and moved on. We did not let resentments calcify into the unspoken grudges that had shaped our family for years. It turned out that my sister and I, freed from the roles we had always played in each other's presence, were capable of something I had not known to want, a real friendship. I want to talk about Damon Whitfield for a moment because he matters to the story in a way that is not about romance exactly, but about what it means to let someone see you clearly. We had been seeing each other for about 2 months when I told him the full story. Not the condensed, socially manageable version my family and I had a falling out over money, but the real version. The spreadsheet, the 36 months, the BMW and the socks, the 2:17 a.m. departure, all of it. We were at his apartment, a Sunday evening in March, eating takeout at his kitchen table. I had not planned to tell him. We had been talking about something else entirely. His family, actually, his mother's recent move to be closer to his sister. And something in the conversation opened a door I had been keeping politely closed, and I walked through it. I talked for a long time. He listened in the way that good listeners listen. Not silently, but with small sounds and questions that let me know he was tracking, that the thread hadn't lost him. He did not make the face that people sometimes make when you tell them something uncomfortable about your family. That particular wince that is half sympathy and half relief that it is not their problem. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How long did you know," he said, "before you actually did something about it?" I thought about it. I knew for most of the second year in the way you know something you're not letting yourself fully think about. I finished knowing in the 3rd year. I did something about it at Christmas. Why Christmas? Because that was the first time they showed me what they thought I deserved instead of just taking what they needed from me. The taking I could find ways to explain. The socks with the price tag still on them that I couldn't explain away. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "My mother used to say you can't pour from an empty cup, but I think the more dangerous situation is when you're pouring from a cup you keep refilling so nobody notices it's empty." That's exactly what it was. How are you doing with it now? Not the logistics. How are you actually doing? It was such a simple question, such a direct, unhurried question. I realized that almost no one had asked me that, how I was actually doing, without it being a prelude to something else, without it being connected to what I was going to do next, or whether I was going to repair things or what my plans were. "I'm good," I said. "I am genuinely, surprisingly good. I feel like myself for the first time in 3 years. And sometimes that feels wonderful, and sometimes it makes me sad, because feeling like yourself for the first time in 3 years means you have to sit with the fact that you weren't for 3 years. That makes sense. I don't regret leaving. I regret waiting so long to leave." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. Not dramatically, just a gesture of presence, of being in the room with me while I sat with something difficult. That was Damon. That was what he was like. I drove home that night thinking about how long it had been since I had been with someone who had no agenda in the room, who wanted nothing from me except the company of who I actually was. It turned out that was what a functional relationship felt like. I had simply forgotten, or perhaps never fully known. 6 months to the day after I had added my parents to my health insurance plan, my father called. I was in my office. I had been promoted 3 months earlier, VP of Marketing, the announcement coming on an unremarkable Wednesday afternoon in a meeting with my CEO that I had thought was about the upcoming campaign budget. And I was reviewing a deck when my phone lit up with my father's name. I looked at it for one full ring before I picked up. Alina. His voice was different from the last time we had spoken, which had been brief and functional. Him calling to confirm the insurance details, me answering with the necessary information and nothing more. This was different. Quieter somehow. Less managed. "Dad, I'm calling to let you know that my new position comes with a benefits package. The coverage starts on the 1st of next month, so you'll be able to remove us from your plan at the end of this month." "I'll take care of it." "Good." A pause. "Alina, I want to thank you for the insurance. I know it wasn't something you owed us. I know that." "You're welcome." Another pause. Longer. The kind that has something in it. "Your mother and I would like to take you to dinner. Not to discuss anything. We're not coming with a list of things to address or repair. We just want to sit with you and hear about your life, if you're willing." I sat back in my chair. "How is your health?" I asked. "Better. Genuinely better. Slower than before, but better. I sleep now." A small exhale that might have been a laugh. I didn't realize how long it had been since I slept properly. "I'm glad. So, dinner? Next month, after the insurance transitions, wherever you'd like to go." I thought about it. I listened for the thing I had trained myself to listen for, the hidden ask, the agenda wrapped in a social occasion. I did not hear it. "Yes," I said. "Next month, I'll text you a place." I put the phone down and sat for a moment before going back to the deck. Then I picked it up again and called Maris. "Dad wants to have dinner," I said. "He wants to take me. He says just to talk, no agenda." A pause. "Do you believe him?" "I think I'm willing to find out." "Do you want me to come?" I thought about it. "Yes. Actually, yes. Come." The restaurant I chose was a neighborhood Italian place. The kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles and a menu that had not changed significantly in 15 years. The kind of place where nobody was performing anything. Not a statement, not a test, just a place with good food and enough noise to take the edge off the silence when silence came. Roderick and Tatiana were already seated when I arrived. I noticed this before I sat down, observing them from across the room before they saw me, like people who had been through something. Not ruined by it, but changed. My father was wearing a sweater I had given him years ago, one I had not seen him wear in a long time. My mother's hair was down, less formal than I was used to. They were holding hands across the table, which they had not done in any family setting in recent memory. They looked, more than anything, like themselves. The real version, underneath the version that had been performing prosperity and management and control for so many years that I had nearly forgotten there was another version. My father stood when he saw me. He looked at me for a moment before he did anything else, just looked, in the way that parents look at their children sometimes when they are trying to take stock of who they have become. "You look good," he said. "So do you, Dad." We sat. Maris arrived 12 minutes later, slightly breathless, still in her work clothes, dropping into the fourth chair with an apologetic smile and immediately reaching for the bread basket. The normalcy of it, the particular, unremarkable normalcy of Maris being late and reaching for food, did something to the air at the table. We ordered, we talked. My father asked about my promotion. He asked real questions. Not the surface questions that are actually about income, but questions about the work itself, about the team I was building, about the particular problems I was trying to solve. He listened to the answers and asked follow-up questions that could only have come from actually listening. My mother asked about Damon. I kept my answer brief, testing the temperature. She said, "He sounds like someone who is actually present." "He is," I said. "That matters more than most things," she said, and left it there, without pushing toward the question she probably wanted to ask but didn't. My father talked about his new job. He was managing the kitchen at a locally owned restaurant. Nothing like Holland's Kitchen in scale, but steady and honest and requiring exactly the skills he had spent 18 years developing. He talked about it without the defensive energy I might have expected, without performing contentment or minimizing the grief of what had been lost. He talked about it as what it was, a new chapter, smaller than the previous one, but his. "I used to think," he said, putting his fork down and looking at the table for a moment, "that the size of what you had built was the measure of who you were. The restaurant, the house, being able to give people things. That was how I understood myself as a father and a husband and a man." He looked up. "I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things." The table was quiet. "I'm not going to ask you to forgive anything tonight," he said. "That's not what this dinner is. I just wanted to say it out loud. Once, with all of you here, I made decisions that hurt this family, especially you." He looked at me, and I am sorry for that, not because of what it cost us, though it cost us a great deal, but because of what it cost you. I thought about what to say. I sat with the space for a moment before filling it. "I know you're sorry, Dad," I said finally. "I'm not there yet on all of it. I might not get there completely, but I'm here tonight, and I think that says something." He nodded. "It does. It says enough." Maris had been quiet through this exchange. She was looking at her plate with an expression I had come to recognize over the past months. The look she got when something was landing differently than she expected, when the version of things she had been carrying was being revised in real time. "I want to say something," she said. We looked at her. I know the main thing tonight is between Alina and you guys, but I want to say that I moved out of this family's house and got a job and paid rent for the first time in my life, and it is the hardest and also the best thing I have ever done, and I think," she paused, pressed her lips together, "I think I needed to do it earlier. I think you did me a disservice by not asking more of me sooner, and I'm not saying that to be unkind. I'm saying it because I think it's true, and because I think we should be able to say true things to each other now." My parents looked at each other. "You're right," my mother said quietly. "We protected you in ways that weren't protection." "Yeah," Maris said. "I know." The food came. We ate. We talked about smaller things. My father's experiments with a new dessert recipe, Maris's certification exam results, a trip my mother was planning to visit a college friend she had not seen in years. We talked about normal things, the things families talk about when they are not managing crises or navigating financial arrangements or performing versions of themselves. I sat at that table and felt something I did not entirely have words for. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet, not completely. Not the restoration of what had been lost, because some things cannot be restored, only replaced with something different. What I felt was more like possibility. The specific, fragile, real possibility of something new being built on the cleared ground of what had been torn down. It was not the family I had grown up believing in. That family, I understood now, had been partly a story I had told myself, partly real and partly constructed from the materials of what I had needed to be true. This was something else. This was 4 people at a table in an Italian restaurant telling the truth with varying degrees of practice and grace, trying to figure out what they could be to each other going forward. It was enough to work with. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November, the kind of autumn day when the light turns golden at 3 o'clock and the air smells like leaves and the particular nearness of winter when my mother sent me a text. I'm near your neighborhood. I know I should have called first. I have something I need to say to you, and I couldn't wait until I found the right time because I keep finding reasons to wait. If you have even 15 minutes, I would be so grateful. I read it twice. Then I texted back. Coffee place downstairs, 20 minutes. She was already there when I arrived. She must have been close, or perhaps she had been sitting somewhere nearby working up to sending the message. She was at a corner table with her coat still on, her hands wrapped around a mug, looking out the window. She looked up when I sat down. Thank you, she said. You said you had something to say. I do. She took a breath. The careful management was gone. The precise social calibration I had grown up watching her apply to every difficult situation. She just looked like a woman who had something to say and was going to say it. I have been replaying Christmas morning in my mind since December, she said, not because I am consumed by guilt, though I am guilty and I know that, but because there is one specific moment I keep coming back to. The moment after I said what I said. Each one receives what they deserve. I said nothing. I saw your face, Alina. You smiled. You said, these will be perfect. And I told myself in the moment that you were fine, that you understood, that this was just, that you were the responsible one, and responsible people didn't need the kind of acknowledgement that Maris needed, and that the different gifts reflected the different circumstances of your lives. She paused. I told myself a story that allowed me not to see what I was actually seeing. What were you actually seeing? My daughter deciding she was done. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I saw it. I knew what that smile was. I have known you your entire life, and I knew that smile was the end of something, and I laughed anyway. Because looking at what I had done, what we had done, was something I was not ready to do at 8 o'clock on Christmas morning. The coffee shop made its small ambient sounds around us. A machine steaming milk. A door opening and closing. I want to apologize to you, my mother said. Not for the gifts specifically, though those were wrong and thoughtless, and I am ashamed of them, but for the whole of it, for 3 years of treating your generosity as a budget line, for teaching you, without ever saying it in words, that your value in this family was measured by what you could provide, for making you feel that wanting things for yourself was a form of selfishness, for the socks with the price tag on. She exhaled. Especially for that, because that wasn't accidental. I think somewhere underneath everything, I needed you to feel small, because you had become so capable and so independent that you frightened me a little, and that is not something a mother should ever do to her daughter. I sat with that for a long time. There is a specific thing that happens when someone tells you a truth about themselves that explains something you have wondered about for years. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't unmake what was done, but it closes a door that has been open and drafty, letting cold air into a room you have been trying to heat, and the closing of it, even if it comes late, changes the temperature. I don't know how to respond to all of that right now, I said finally. I don't want to say something that isn't true just because you've been honest. That wouldn't be fair to either of us. I know, I'm not asking you to respond to it. I just needed you to have it, the real version, without anything attached to it. No request, no condition, just, this is what I did, and I know I did it, and I am sorry. I looked at my mother across the small table in the afternoon light. She was 61 years old. She had spent most of her adult life managing the gap between how things were and how she needed them to appear. She had raised 2 daughters with different hands. One held at a distance and asked to carry things, one held close and protected from weight. She had made those choices out of a complicated mixture of love and limitation and the values she had inherited from her own mother, values she had never fully examined until they collapsed under the weight of their own consequences. She was not a villain. She was not a saint. She was a person who had done real harm and was trying to reckon with it honestly, without a net. I hear you, I said. I'm not there yet on forgiveness. I want to be honest about that. But I hear you, and I believe you, and I think that matters. It's more than I deserve right now. Maybe, but it's what I can give. She nodded. She wrapped her hands more tightly around her mug. Outside the window, the November light was doing the thing it does in autumn, going gold, and then quickly copper, and then starting to fade. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "And are you happy?" Not in the everything is fine way, actually happy. I thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved to be thought about. I thought about the Saturday mornings with the good coffee and the light through the windows, Damon's hand across the table, Maris in the kitchen with flour on her forearms concentrating on pasta dough, the promotion meeting, the unremarkable Wednesday afternoon when everything I had been building quietly came visible, Costa Rica. I had gone in August 7 days, a resort I had seen in a magazine years ago and filed under someday, and someday had arrived. I had sat on a terrace overlooking the ocean on the 4th morning and thought, I built this. This specific moment is mine because I finally stopped giving everything away. "Yes," I said, "I'm actually happy." My mother smiled, a real smile. Not managed, not positioned, just the smile of a mother who loves her daughter and is glad her daughter is well. "Good," she said softly. "That's everything." We sat together for another 30 minutes. We talked about her plans to take a bookkeeping course. She had been doing informal bookkeeping for local businesses, and someone had told her she should get certified. We talked about Maris's apartment, the studio she had moved into 2 months ago, the sage green she had painted the walls. We talked about small things, ordinary things, the things that accumulate into a life. When she left, she hugged me at the door. I let her. It was not the same as it had been. It probably never would be exactly the same, but it was real and it was warm and it was something I was willing to have. I walked back to my building in the copper light of the late November afternoon and thought about what had just happened, about what could be salvaged from the wreckage of something and what had to simply be left in the wreckage and grieved. I thought about what I was carrying now compared to what I had been carrying a year ago. The difference was not just financial, though it was that too. The Honda CR-V ran perfectly. The apartment was mine, properly, fully mine, with furniture I had chosen and walls I had decorated and a kitchen stocked with things I genuinely wanted to eat. The savings account was growing for the first time in 3 years. The credit card was paid off. The February trip to New Orleans with Cynthia was already booked and paid for without a second thought. But the real weight that was gone was the internal one, the constant background calculation, the guilt about wanting things, the strange, grinding shame of being a person who earned 6 figures and still felt financially precarious because everything extra was going somewhere else. The performance of being fine when I was not fine. All of that was gone. What I was carrying now was lighter and more honest, the ongoing work of building something real relationships with actual foundations, real love that did not require me to disappear into it, real family, imperfect, damaged in places, requiring ongoing attention, but willing, at last, to look at itself clearly. It was the week before Christmas when I understood, finally, what had been saved. Maris called me on a Thursday evening. She had been in her own apartment for 4 months, and her voice on the phone had acquired a quality over that time that I had not heard in it before, a kind of grounded ease, the sound of a person who knows where they stand because they put themselves there. "Are you doing Christmas this year?" she asked, "with Mom and Dad?" I had been thinking about this. "I think so. Something small." "Same. I thought maybe, I have a friend from work, Lori Simmons. She doesn't have family in the city. I was going to ask if it would be okay to bring her." I thought about this. About Maris, a year ago, who would never have considered that someone outside the family might need a place to go, who had lived entirely within the radius of her own comfort. About Maris now, who had a friend from work she was thinking about. "Bring her," I said. "Of course." "Also," Maris said, "I'm making the lasagna. You're making lasagna for Christmas." "I've been practicing for 2 months. I'm ready." "Okay," I said. "I'll bring wine." I sat for a moment after we hung up, in the quiet of my apartment, in the particular quality of December light that comes through north-facing windows in the early evening. A year ago, at this time, I was driving to my parents' house with a trunk full of carefully chosen presents and financial anxiety in my chest, and the faint, unexamined dread of someone who knows, somewhere below the surface of things, that something is wrong but has not yet let themselves finish the thought. A year ago, I was about to sit in a garage and watch my sister receive a $50,000 car and then unwrap clearance socks and hear the words, "Each one receives what they deserve," while my family laughed. A year ago, at 2:17 in the morning, I drove away. And look at what that drive had made possible. My father worked in a kitchen he did not own, and he slept at night, and he was learning to bake on weekends. My mother was getting her bookkeeping certification and had started going for morning walks, something she had talked about wanting to do for years but had never made time for when her life was consumed with maintaining a version of things that wasn't real. Maris was 25 years old and living alone and making lasagna from scratch and thinking about whether her coworker had somewhere to go for Christmas. And I was 30 years old, with a job I was good at and a man I liked spending time with and a savings account I was not afraid to look at and an apartment that felt like mine. And I was going to spend Christmas with my family. Not because I had to, not because the guilt was unbearable, but because I had chosen to. Because this particular version of my family, the real one that had emerged from the wreckage of the performed one, was something worth choosing. That is what I had not understood driving away in the dark on Christmas night. That leaving was not the end of the story. It was the condition for the rest of it. You cannot build something true on the foundation of something false. You have to clear the ground first, even when the clearing is painful, even when it looks like destruction. You have to let the house of cards fall before you can build something that stands. My mother said it to diminish me. I know that now, not because she is a cruel person, but because I had become capable enough and independent enough that diminishing me briefly was more comfortable than confronting what she had done. Be humble. Each one receives what they deserve. I have thought about those words many times in the year since she said them. Here is what I have come to believe. She was right, just not in the way she meant. Each one does receive what they deserve. Eventually, if they are willing to do the work of deciding what they actually deserve and then holding that line even when it costs them something. I deserved a life I was present for. I deserved to eat groceries I had chosen without tallying the cost. I deserved to say yes to the trip and the dinner and the spontaneous Saturday plan. I deserved to drive a car with doors that opened properly. I deserve to save money and build something and not give everything away in the name of a family loyalty that was, in practice, only flowing in one direction. I deserve to be a daughter, not a bank account. It took me 3 years to believe that. It took one Christmas morning, a pair of socks with a price tag, and a $2.99 moment of clarity to finally act on it. I do not regret leaving. I regret that I waited so long to leave. I regret the $55,500. I regret the vacations I did not take and the things I did not buy and the nights I spent anxious about money that was technically mine. I regret that my father had to lose his restaurant and his house and spend 5 days in cardiac care before our family was willing to look honestly at what we had built. But I do not regret the conversation. I do not regret the clear-eyed middle-of-the-night decision to stop. I do not regret the months of holding the line, even when my grandmother called and my aunt called and my sister showed up at my door and my father's voice on a voicemail said, "Your reaction is disproportionate." I do not regret becoming someone who knows the difference between helping family and being used by family, between love and obligation, between choosing to give and being unable to stop. The woman who drove away at 2:17 in the morning was not angry. She was clear. And clarity, I have learned, is the thing that makes everything else possible. If you are the responsible one in your family, if you are the one who carries the weight so others don't have to feel it, who says yes when you mean no, who has been performing fine for so long that you have forgotten what actually fine feels like, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to put it down. Not forever, necessarily. Not without grief or difficulty or the long, complicated work of figuring out what your relationships look like on the other side of honesty. But you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to finish the arithmetic. You are allowed to read the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet and let it mean what it means. You deserve the life you have been funding for other people. Go get it. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for staying with me through this story. I know it was long, and I know some of it was hard, and I know that some of you recognize pieces of your own lives in it. I could feel it as I was telling it. If this story moved you, if it gave you something you needed to hear, please subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who might need it too. Leave me a comment. Tell me your city. Tell me what part stayed with you. Tell me your own story if you want to. I read every single one. You are not alone in this. And you deserve so much more than clearance socks. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time.